I started off designing gardens all around the world, having a great life, winning the Chelsea Flower Show, doing all sorts of really, things that I thought were cool, at the time. And I've come full circle now at this point to thinking that what kind of, where did we go wrong that we think we have the right to take a patch of this planet and morph it into something that we believe is beautiful, when the earth herself knows exactly what to do. And so I started this organization. I don't know what you call it. I called it We Are the Ark, Acts of Restorative Kindness to the Earth, because I wanted it to be owned by everybody. I didn't go down the route of turning it into some kind of a charitable organization, because I want it to be just an idea that spreads, and hopefully somebody won't take it and patent it into a porn site or something. But in the meantime, we'll just hope for the best, because it's like it costs a fortune to get it patented, as far as I can figure out, and the kids need school books, so it's not happening. So anyway, so the reason I started this, and probably all of you have heard this story, but I'm going to tell you again for people who haven't heard this story. So one day I was designing a garden at my desk, looking down over the garden in the rented house I owned, and the house I was renting. And my landlord had allowed me to let half of the acre turn into kind of brambles and let it go wild. Now, I just liked that idea. I didn't think about it, I just liked that idea. But the rest he wanted to keep mown, so it was just a desert, a green desert. And I lived in Wexford, I still do, in this very rural spot. And not as rural as this, but it's rural for Wexford, which is, it's kind of an industrial county. But anyway, I was sitting at my desk and a fox ran past, and it was winter and it was morning time. And just after the fox, a couple of hares, which is unusual in itself. And I kept looking, and a while later I saw a little hedgehog run along the edge of the hedge. And I thought, that's really strange, because it's winter and, they're usually nocturnal and should be asleep. And so I went outside and I walked in the direction they were coming from. And went up to the end of the lane, and across the road had been this beautiful thicket of a field. It was full of brambles and hawthorn and blackthorn and gorse and wild roses, and full of native plants. And somebody had got planning permission to build a house at the top, and they had gone in with a digger and cleared it out to make a garden, without any thought for the creatures that called it home. And I stood there and my heart broke, because I had done this so many times myself. And that was the end of my career as a garden designer. Even though I had tried very hard over the years to create gardens that were designed within the shapes and patterns of nature, and were very gentle, but yet I realized it's all bullshit, and as much as I love the way I worked with land, I realized I had to stop. And so I went inside and I came up with this idea. And the reason I called it Ark was because I remembered those stories of Noah's Ark when I was young, and it felt like that was a great symbol. And then people were freaked out because they thought it was religious, so that's why I added acts of restorative kindness, and that kind of helped. I think people were a little less worried, and which is great. And so it's spread all over the world. So there's I think there's about 17,000 people in that are part of it at the moment, and then lots of people are not part of it, but they're still it's spreading. And the reason it's so simple is I ask people to at least give half of any land they have under their care back to nature, and and then the rest to grow their own food if they can, because a big part of arking, as I call it, is to step outside the food system, which is basically killing everything on the planet. And if you can grow as much of your own food as you can in that half, if you have more than enough, then share it with your friends, create communities around growing food without chemicals. It's a very simple thing, really. So I wrote a website, put it up with my friends Claire and Joe, and Jen in America, she put it together, and it's very simple. All the information is free. it's not like rocket science, but yet people are confused. And so I wrote a book, which is coming out in October, to break it down. And basically it's not rewilding, which is what people keep thinking it is. And rewilding really needs about 1,500 acres for it to work. You need to reintroduce, the keystone species and the apex predators and things like that in order for the system to balance. And because we've broken the web of life, we can't exactly bring wolves back into a suburban garden, or so we have to try and think outside the box. So I'm hoping that at the end of my lifetime, if we make it beyond that next 10 years, which I'm sure we will, but that people won't have gardens anymore, that they'll have arcs. And that time of treating land, I keep seeing people, I know, it's so nice, I never see anyone, lads, I just don't leave the house at this stage. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so I hope the gardens will be arcs, and that whole period of time where we felt the understandable need to push the wild away, instead we'll embrace it. And that whole time will be past, and that gardens will, like the Chelsea Flower Show, all those things will be gone. Unless it's arcing, and then I can go with it. But like at the moment I'm trying to design a garden or an arc, sorry, I have to get my head around it too, up in Westport in 400 acres, and the government has funded it, as well as the Hughes brothers who bought Westport Estate. And so we're doing something really special up there. I've designed this interactive space for people to come, and it's based on the Tree of Life. So there's the world of our ancestors, and there's where we live and breathe, and then there's the world of spirit. And it's all truly working in harmony with the earth, because we're letting what is there come out, and we are bringing in as much diversity from local provenance as we can to build up the sanctuary that it is, and the experience for people to come and learn and interact and truly connect with nature. And often people feel they need to have an experience to connect with nature, when really they just need to walk outside, and if they're lucky enough to have a patch of land, there they are, But it's very hard to do that in a garden or a park, and it's very hard to teach the young generations to love nature when they have no experience of it. So like the shifting baseline syndrome is that phenomenon where every generation has a different baseline of what is natural. And so my dad used to tell me about the sky going dark overhead for a moment, blocking out the sun, from swarms of butterflies passing, or migrating birds, and that doesn't happen anymore. But we think it's amazing when we see one bird, and that's called shifting baseline syndrome, or the fact that our kids think a spruce woodland over here is wood, and it's a crop, and it's dead, and it's poisoned, and that isn't a woodland. That is, but they don't know any different. And if we don't tell them, if we don't bring it back, they can't love this place, they can't protect this place. So it's really important that we teach them what's wild and natural, and it's really important to give people hope, because if you care about the planet at this point in time, if you're like anything sensitive like I am, you're fucked, because nothing works. Nothing is working. You cannot expect politicians to solve it, because they're caught in a web of their own weaving. They can do nothing. They cannot help us. It's up to us. We have to build this movement from the ground up, and all the greatest changes in the world have come from the ground up. They have come from the ground up. Nothing has come from the top down, literally nothing. So it's up to us to change this world, and we have to do it quickly. We really do. We have to do it quickly, and we can. And it's amazing how quickly you can do it if you just give people hope. And at the moment, there's very little to give them hope. Obviously, when you meet wonderful people like Grace and Matt and Ray and Alan, oh my God, and I have a huge crush on Alan, sorry, but I do. And you do get hopeful, because there's so many good people in the world, But then when I go back to Wexford and I'm surrounded by people who are really only interested in the GAA results, and I just like, oh my God, I can't cope. And then I think, no, I have to keep going. And then I connect with other people and I realize, no, there's lots of us out there. We just need something to bond us together. And so we are the ark, like we're the hope, you know, and it is possible to change it. So if you want to save the planet, you have to start with your own patch of it. Otherwise, we're at a hiding to nothing. Like, that's really it. So, anybody got any questions? Yeah.
You mentioned at the start, you know, like what changed in us that we thought we could take this patch of land and morph it into something that, you know, suited us. Mm-hmm. And I think, is that something that we need to lean into, that question, you know, in a deeper psyche?
Probably, yeah.
You know, if we hope to resolve things better.
I totally agree. I mean, gardeners are really threatened by me, you know, because I'm kind of saying, listen, lads, the industry that you have is an industry. You know, it uses 10 times more chemicals per acre than industrial farming. Mm. You know, it's destroying the planet in so many patches. You know, gardens are based on non-native plants, and it's all about what's pretty, what we think is pretty, what we think is emotive or, you know, impactful, or some bullshit that I would have done for years, you know. So you've got to kind of go, no lads, like that's dead, there's nothing living in that. There's like very little hope in that space. I mean, you know, I don't know if any of you ever saw the Tommy Tiernan interview I did. Like I was fit to throw myself out the window after that, because he didn't get it. He didn't get it at all. Like, I think it was pretty obvious. Like, he just thought I was threatening, you know. And that's what I come up against a lot of the time, because people love their gardens, and they don't realize that you know, they will love it so much more if they're sharing it with all these magical creatures, you know. And they'll all come back almost overnight. It's amazing. Like, I sat by my pond last night, and I sat there. I was away working, and I only got back around, I think it was around 9, and I was fucking horrified because my teenage son and all his mates had jumped into the pond to go for a swim. And all I could think of was, oh my God, all the chemicals that they have. And you know the way they're just sprayed with links. Links. I was thinking, oh fuck. So I sat out there, but luckily everything was okay. It felt okay. There was, you know, the dragonflies and everything, well, they were all gone asleep, but it felt okay. And the bats came back when it got dusky and things, it was okay, you know. But I feel like I am the guardian of all those patches. I feel like I'm the guardian of all the creatures that have moved in to my patch of land. I'm in charge. That's the wrong word. I'm responsible for their safety. I'm not suggesting I'm a god. I don't mean it like that. I just mean my heart has opened to include every little creature that comes in, mushroom, wild plant, you know, everything, you know, even the rats that have moved into the walls of my house. I don't know what I'm gonna do, you know. I haven't figured. I keep asking them to leave. Like, come on, lads, get out. But yeah, it's hard to know what to do in those situations. But yes, this idea of but it's you know, even if I can get people to give a corner back, right? Mm-hmm. That corner starts expanding so quickly because they realize it's actually that's true nature. And the rest is just bullshit, you know. And I keep saying I want people to be guardians, not gardeners. That whole concept of gardening has to change. And just arcing is the way to go forward, and just let all that go, because we're screwed. Like, if we don't, we have to do something really fast. And if we can create a patchwork quilt of hope almost, with this idea of restoring all these patches. Now I know there's all the connectivity issues, there's so much that needs to be developed, but it doesn't matter if you can bring hope back into people's hearts through even like their balconies or their window boxes or whatever it is. If they see how quickly nature responds, if you just support her rather than you know, sticking stuff in because you think you should, or you know. Anyway, that's the way forward. Yeah. Of course, yeah.
So you mentioned support.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of what you talk about, some people might construe it as being very passive.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Being
No.
a sort of guardian. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like what sort of supports do you do, or like what are you doing in this Westport project to support
Yeah.
an arc?
Okay, so arcing is based on creating as many different edges as possible between layers of ecosystem kind of maturity. So because we can't have the wolves and we can't have the all the creatures that are missing. So what you do is you become them. So I say, okay, if you want to become the herbivores, that means you cut an area of lawn, and then there's an edge between that lawn, which is not monoculture of grass, by the way. It's just a short meadow or a path through a meadow. And then you have an arc meadow, which is not wildflowers in the sense of all that colour that has been infiltrating and greenwashed into the system, It's things like thistles and buttercups and docks and whatever wants to come out to heal the land. That, and then that moves into scrub, which is brambles and thorny things, then like blackthorn and hawthorn and all the thorny things, and then you go into pioneer species woodland, and then you go into the old stands of woodland if you're lucky enough to have them, or at least allow a woodland to become mature. And it's as many edges as possible, and then within that you create wildlife ponds. It's just common sense stuff then. It's like, dead hedges, piles of wood, leave the leaves on the ground, like get rid of those bloody things, the leaf blowers, and to understand that you don't cut your meadows in autumn like you're told. You leave them until the birds are finished feeding on the seed heads in spring, and then leave some of it to be tufty and don't cut it at all, because the shrews and bumblebees and things will find homes there. And there's just so many different layers of support. And even if you've only got a tiny patch, like just say, even if you only have a windowsill, go and collect some nettles and things from around the area and fill them up, and it's cool, you get to see, if you're really lucky, you'll get to see the butterflies laying their eggs and the caterpillars eating them, or I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's amazing for people to see spiders. It's like suddenly with the awareness of nature, and we've pushed everything away, and it's our own true spirit, our true nature is being pushed away. So it's about embracing it, and it transforms us as well as the earth, which is just a mirror of each other anyway. Anybody is that okay? Yeah. Anybody got any more questions? Yeah.
You mentioned there that the rewilding can work, you said maybe only like for huge farms, like the few 100-acre farms like you mentioned above in Westport and that. But for smaller farmers like us down here in the West Coast, where we might only have 20 or 30, 40 acres,
yeah.
And you mentioned the Hare's Corner. Is it, besides the Hare's Corner, as we kind of come back to kind of biodiversity and rewilding, we're looking at reducing animals and particularly cattle in favour of other things, and hemp and the various. Is there anything else that you think can work in balance with farming? Because we still have to make a living, besides the Hare's Corner. And is there any other techniques or advances we can make in that?
Can I just interject with one little thing? Yeah. Do we still have to make a living? How do you hold that, Mary? Do you hold? How strong are you on? All right, let's just reframe that. We have to make a living from the land. Do you agree with that?
I think it's it's wording that we probably need to let go of. We need to survive, really. And it's hard because we live in such a fucked up society, But yeah, you can do it, and if that's the words we're going to use, because I make a living, I have to, and that's not.
It could even be things like you mentioned, to say, for example,
well, there's
not cutting the meadows till later in the
in the spring.
So even if you are exploring something like hemp or flax or new crops that are obviously less damaging, say, than cattle, it could be things like that, which is not necessarily making a living, but continue to work with the nature, because yourself, when it comes to.
I understand.
You're in this struggle.
I totally know what it's like. Yeah,
background,
I know.
And then we feel sometimes that certain politicians or people in certain parties talk down to us as farmers. And we have to get in. We have to work together. Yeah. And it can't happen overnight. So what I'm asking, besides the Hare's Corner, is there other ways we can move forward together?
You could let your hedgerows expand to be 5-10 meters thick. Like, would that be possible?
Yeah.
You can diversify them to, like, the more diversity of native plants, the better, the more support you're going to give. So, like, you know about insects and their partnerships. So, native plants have partnerships with insects and lots of other things. And so they've all kind of, a lot of them are very specialist, and so they won't be able to survive without certain plants. Or, you know, and people always talk about feeding birds, for example. I'm diverse. Sorry, I'll come back to that. Ponds. Put in, like, if you look at Google Maps, you'll find probably on your small farm there's loads of ghost ponds. And you know what a ghost pond is?
Yeah, like a small turlock.
Like 87% of the ponds were filled in. So I grew up on a farm, and it was dotted with little ponds, but my great grandfather, I guess, filled them in because he needed more land, you know, to grow crops and have his cattle and all that stuff. So when I was given, when my parents died, they gave me 5 acres. And so I went on Google Maps and found which parts were dark. And so I got in a digger, and I got the digger to dig it out. And sure, fair enough, there was old bits of metal and all sorts of stuff that he had thrown in underneath. And when I divined a couple of springs and made sure they were kind of, you know, I cut channels for them. I dug down and cut channels for them to fill, and then the rain filled it anyway. I'm lucky enough to have clay, so all I had to do was dig a pond and puddle it, you know, and I made it very deep. And you know, when I can afford it, I'll probably dig more ponds because there's more over beside it. But
use rubber or plastic? Or
oh God, no! I say don't have to. But actually, if you can find somebody with clay, that would let you, you know, if they were digging out a pond, if you could take their clay and you could use that to form the liner, it's really the best way to do it if you can. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And shallow edges, so creatures can get in and out, and lots of things, rocks at the edges and things for things to cling onto and hide under. And what else? Well, just, I suppose, if you could put sort of even little copses, or increase the amount of hedgerows, make smaller fields, do agroforestry solutions. You know, I'm sure you know about all this because you're obviously well into it.
We have a biodiversity plan.
Yeah. Okay. So this, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, there's loads of different ways of doing things, you know yourself. But I have a section for farmers on the website, actually, and there's a section for farmers, but you're way ahead of me. Like, I mean, it's just to gently open farmers, because I know what they're like. Like, my brother got left the farm, and sure, within a week of my parents dying, he'd ripped out every hedgerow and sprayed the whole thing off. And so I'm this little tiny sanctuary, but that's because it's just what people do, and he doesn't like me very much, so that's fair enough, you know. But that's okay. I love him anyway. So that's it.
And any more questions immediately? Right, we'll move. I'll leave you the question here, and then we'll come back to you.
Sorry.
Very welcome.
Hi.
I was just wondering, just when you said about looking on Google Maps, like, what do you mean just by, is it darker grass?
Yeah, it's like they're dark patches. And sorry, I didn't finish what I was going to say. The reason that they work is because all the microbiome is there still. And so all the wild plants now are coming up through it, like the water mints and all sorts of things. I don't know what they are, but there's a lady called Frances from Barra Aquatics who came up, and she brought me some native water plants to keep it kind of healthy, you know, because there's no stream going through it. But she spotted loads of them coming up, and she knew what they were, but sure, I haven't a clue. But they're there, so that's the point. Is all the guts are there still, you know.
Microbiome.
Yeah. So
you mentioned agroforestry, and like, you know, we're familiar with Martin Crawford,
Yeah.
trialing lots of different plants and things from around the world to see what would work in these sort of climates. And then there's Ernst Scott and the syntropic agroforestry. So I was just wondering, how would you work with that? Was also trying to, you know, have a lot of native things there for the insect relationships.
yeah, so forest gardening is what you're talking about, and I mean, if you use that system to grow your own food, because I mean, sure, most of the cabbages and all those things are not native as such, you know. They've been morphed, and you know the way. But forest gardening is full of layers of different types of plants, and once you mix native plants into that system as well, and you also if you don't take up, if you can leave, if you've only got a small space, if you can leave lots of space around the edge to be wild in layers, if you can, and then do the support stuff as well. It's just, that's great. If it means now, forest gardening takes years to become abundant, but it does become abundant. But in this type of in this type of light, it needs to be quite, you have to adapt it so that things are much further apart. And, we have a forest garden in Wexford, I'm building one on where I am, but in my friend Claire's place, and it's just magic, but to be honest, most of the time we leave it for the birds, because they just love it so much, and we love the birds, and so we, Claire and Joe have, they've got loads of food growing as well, so that's what happened in the end. But at this year, finally, they actually got to take a lot of berries, and they got to take, because there was so many, that the birds had enough, and they had enough to share. So that's kind of, that's not really answering your questions, but it's about including native plants in there to support the creatures as well. The problem with the pollinating plants that people are always told to plant in their gardens, in my understanding of it, is that the insects are attracted to these big showy flowers. Of course they are, and they'd get a great boost of nectar or whatever. But as a result, they ignore the insignificant native things, and they start to retreat as a result. And plants are disappearing more faster than anything. And so you're doing a disservice to an ecosystem by bringing in the pollinating flowers. And it's all about selling you stuff, and really you don't need to buy anything. You need to collect locally. Local provenance is really important. I think it's the most important thing. Just like Jeremy would have talked about that probably in his seed collecting thing with Mitch. That's why I didn't get introduced to Mitch. But anyway, yeah, I've lost my train of thought now. Sorry.
Owen has a question there.
Hi.
I was just, some people say that, I guess, the sense of apathy out there is one of the biggest problems. Not so much denial of biodiversity loss or climate change, is apathy.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
Is a bigger problem. And I was kind of wondering, you mentioned, I suppose, you've come full circle now. So maybe two parts. If you were to go back to the start of your journey, what would you need someone to say to you to maybe try and convince you what you think now?
Avoid musicians. Sorry, whatever. That's what came into my head anyway. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, what would I say to?
Well, what would you think someone could have said to you earlier on to me?
Oh no, I had to go all out with my ego. I wouldn't. There was no way I would have been open to hearing anything. I think, So
I suppose that leads to the second part. How do you get to? Most people here are generally interested in what we're talking about, so it's a captive audience, I guess. But how do you get to a greater proportion of the public that maybe it's not that they're not interested, but they're just busy doing other things?
So I guess what I'm saying to them is, look lads, all you have to do is put up a sign. Make it yourself, I'm not selling you anything. Put up a sign saying this is an ark, and you can put the website underneath and stick it in your garden so that your neighbours can see it, and when your garden turns into nothing but brambles because you're too busy to do anything else, that's fine with me, because that will wake that person up, because they'll see what comes back. And once their heart opens and the magic comes back into their patch, that will shift the apathy. It really does, it's kind of cool. So that is a huge problem, is apathy. And also, coming from a farming background, there's also, and you must know this one, it's this entrenchment, which is harder to shift, and you cannot force anyone to do anything. So all you can do is do your own patch and inspire people. You can't force anyone, especially the entrenched Like, I'm sure by doing what you do with your farm, you're going to infect those guys or women over the fence or over the hedge, because they'll see it, and if you don't shove it down their necks, they will open their hearts slightly, and that's really what it's all about. You can't force anyone, you know.
That musicians. Stay with musicians.
What?
That stay with
That way, yeah. Well, the male kind, anyway.
Anybody else? There was another hand down here too. So will the gentleman at the back of the glasses or in the middle of the glasses?
Hi,
Where are you?
native plants, strictly native plants you're talking about. Would you be against growing walnuts in Ireland?
I know, that's the thing, like, because that's the thing about food. We have to grow food. So no, I'm not.
Okay.
It's trying to find a balance. I mean, if you think we could find a balance with just the native plants, great. But if you're hungry, you'd eat anything. You'd eat a farmer's arse through a hedge, wouldn't you? So we really have to find a balance with food, you know. And so you can't ignore that. You know, I don't know, like, you know, I'm only trying. I don't know what the solution is. I just know I haven't figured it out yet, you know. I'm not a farmer. I'm a fucking garden designer. Like, what the hell do I know? You know, I'm just trying to get people to because I've realized that was bullshit, you know, and I just trying to get people to stop doing that and to open their hearts up to doing something else. And I do realize that people should be growing their own food if we can, you know. If there's older people, say, who have, and there's so many older people who have gardens and they're lonely, you know, go and talk to them and say, listen, would you be willing for me to do this here in return for sharing the harvest? Like, you're going to make that person so happy, as long as they're not afraid of you. Do you know?
I mean, they're a library as well in themselves, you know.
They're amazing generally, or they can be a pain in the arse like anyone else too, but you know, that is really cool, you know, because then they get to experience all the creatures that come to the Ark, and they get to share in the produce, and you get to work with some land, you know, and that's it. Yeah.
I think there's time for a few more questions.
Sure.
There, so
There's a lady there.
there's a lady here as well.
Oh.
You're seeing.
I'm sorry, go on, because I pointed, I'll come back to you now, sorry.
So, touching on your design skills, how do you incorporate that really good specialist skill into the arking?
Yeah, so that's where I came up against a massive hurdle in Westport. So I had to figure it out.
They have an agenda.
Yeah,
I'd be very familiar with the projects.
Yeah, okay.
Specific agenda.
Yeah,
they want to achieve.
They want that to support a lot of people in the community, and they're really good. Like, they're good people, you know. But it has to be commercial, and I'm there going, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to make a public park which is also an ark? So that's where I had to really. So I'm working with an ecologist, and he's helping me figure out how every single detail of that plan is supportive to something. So if we have an edging on a path, then it also has to be a habitat. You know, the path itself is going to like be probably seashells from the local fish industry crushed, or everything has to come from local. It's really hard.
So what about the design of that?
Yeah.
You've got a parkland setting, so where do you begin and end the design of combining all of those elements?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. One is in the 4-acre wall garden, and so that's just grass at the moment, and so that's easy, you know, because anything you do is going to help. And so I've woven lots of myths and stories and patterns in, and it's become an ark as well. So that's kind of how I hope to get the garden people on board, is because you can still have somewhere that they have kind of, I know it sounds crazy, but I think it'll work. Like, it's kind of like forming a bridge between the gardeners and the archivists, as we call each other, you know, is to try, you can still make your designy spaces, you can change your industry to be a positive one. If you just, I have to help people figure that out, and that means figuring it out myself. But if I can pull it off, it'll be great, you know, and to be fair to the lads up there, they're really supportive, and they're not going to turn around and say, no, we can't do that. Everything I'm saying so far, they're going, okay, yeah. So that's good, you know. Yeah. Sorry, this lady was waiting, sorry. Yeah.
So I just wanted to go back to the pond thing.
Yeah.
So we have an acre of land and we've been trying to be divinely inspired about where to put it. And we had a digger come into the land, and now it's it was quite sloped, and now it's got a lot of tiers. And I think a lot of the old, let's say, dark spots might have been removed. And as much as we're trying to wild it, there's natural like places where the water's kind of filling up. And I'm wondering, even though they're quite high up, I'm wondering would that be a good spot? It is clay soil. I don't know in your opinion, because I don't.
Well, if it's clay, you're away in a hack, like, you know.
If it's like, I mean, at the highest, it's at the highest point of the.
Well, you can have. Why don't you have them on all tiers? You know, I mean, like you have a high one and like a. Why not? The more water you have, the more life you're going to support, like, you know.
Yeah.
So, I kind of go for it. You know, why not? And you know, I know naturally it would be in the lower part, but. Sure, if it's holding up there, sure, why not, you know? You can't go wrong when your intention is good.
For sure.
Do you know? And that's, well, you can, but well, I can anyway. But basically, just try your best, and that's all you can do. I mean, that's all I'm asking anyone to do is just try your best. Like, if it's only a square metre, then just try your best. And the seed bank has approximately 5,000 seeds every square foot. Or every square metre. My brain doesn't remember, way too many drugs in the past. But I can't remember how many is it square metre or square foot, but there's 5,000 weed seeds in every square metre, I think. And they just need 1/30th of a second's worth of light to activate and come out. And so they're the things we want to start with, right? Because that's nature's way of dealing with it. Now, if you're in America or Canada, you're screwed because they are covered in non-native invasive plants, and the seed bank has been decimated, so that they've so much more work to do to heal that land. Whereas we're kind of lucky, we don't have, like, I know the rhododendron issue is a major issue, and you know, Japanese knotweed and all these things, and before anybody asks me, no, I don't believe nature knows what she's doing in spreading those plants across the world, because I think that's our fault, and we have to do the work of helping her, because we've taken over too much and done too much damage. It's up to us to fix it, you know. Yeah.
We have about another 5 minutes of questions, so if anybody else has questions, there's a few more hands coming up.
Well, I just nodded at this. I'm sorry, because we quickly go on.
Yeah, in your own situation.
Sorry, Grace.
In Wexford.
Yeah.
How do you handle that kind of transition zone? You were talking about, you know, being a good example to your neighbours in the sense of what you're doing and seeing the biodiversity come back, and but that always, in the real world, that always doesn't happen. You can also be a threat to your neighbours. So when you think about pesticides and that transition zone, our borders,
between them,
despite the beauty of our goals and ideals, also we're very dependent on who's around us and what's going on around beyond our borders. So I just wonder what's your approach to an upset neighbour or not very happy neighbour for all those reasons.
Okay, well, there's this old tradition in Ireland called beating the bounds, and it's something that people did every year. And look, the earth is like a big heart, right? And when we decided to look at her in terms of ownership instead of in terms of guardianship, it shattered into millions of tiny pieces, and we're still breaking that heart up, right? And I think we need to restore every little patch of that, and we can do it, you know, we can do this, right? But beating the bounds takes whatever little patch that you're looking after, and once a year walking the boundary with the intention of letting the land know which part you're working with, and so you become part of its family and it becomes part of your family. And so that was done specifically by the Irish to solve disputes with neighbours, because it shifted the energy, you know, and I get people to do it now all the time because it solidifies the energy of your space. So you can do it with, like, you know, beating a bar on or some something like that, or banging two stones together, or singing, or nothing if you don't want. Just think about it as you walk around. Or, you know, the Catholic version later on where they sprinkle the old holy water. But water is magic, you know, so water, magic, if you put the intention into water and sprinkle that water yourself, that will work too. You know, I'm not trying to take away from any of that. That's whatever you're into. But yeah, that works. And then a riparian zone, if you have enough space, where you plant loads of native thick plants between you and the chemicals to clean it, and fast growing things, you know.
What did you call it?
Riparian, is that what they're called? Riparian zones, yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it is.
I know nothing. Sorry, hi.
Hi Mary. How knew the Ark sit along on the shelf with the Guardian Awakening?
Well, you know, like I was saying there to Mr. Scanlon, Mike, first earlier on, I was only learning, you know, but I guess it's still a really good stepping stone for people coming from a world of gardens. And I still love that book, you know, and I love that it really upsets people that I talk to snails in it, you know, so that's good enough for me. Like, my snails are really good, and I have a vegetable garden, and I have 4 rows of kales, for example, and I gave one of them to the caterpillars. They decimated them, and they left my 3 rows alone because I asked them to. You know, we've forgotten that you can interact with this magical world around us by just saying it, by opening your mouth and being part of it. And so that's my favourite part of that book, because that really upsets people.
Mary, thank you so much. I'm getting the nod and the wink from Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
It's going to be another workshop showing up. Mary is with us this evening as part of a panel discussion. It's going to be super exciting.
Oh, yeah.
The Minister for Biodiversity is going to be there, so yes. I'm looking forward to how things, what Mary has to say to her.
Me too.
Anything else?
So, thank you very much for coming, everyone.